You're from a farming background. You live in Cornwall, but you come back and forth to Scotland. What are the Scottish farmers saying? What are you hearing from that community of which you are a part?
I think it's the same issues over and over again. A forgotten community. These are blue-collar workers, effectively, some of the most multi-skilled workers on the face of the planet, and the bedrock of an economy, and they feel forgotten about. Many industries have been torn apart and disenfranchised over the last 40 years, but farming consistently has. And now we've got the additional aspect of the net zero agenda. And farmers are concerned that this is going to affect their yields, their livelihoods, and the government are completely out of touch with what the farmers' needs are. What we're experiencing in Europe, which has gone one stage further, is effectively a blue-collar rising, a blue-collar spring, because enough is enough of governments who are failing to take care of business of a primary source of the economy, namely farmers. Going back to answer your question in Scotland, they're certainly not at the stage of what the German farmers or the French farmers are doing. But I think there is the same mood, the same feeling that they're being neglected by the government. When you're getting severe pressure in terms of brokerage agreements with supermarkets, where farmers are getting pennies for their crops and their products, and at the same time governments are implementing draconian net zero measures, it's almost impossible for farmers to make some sort of profit. And what's happening beyond that is then, because farmers are under so much pressure, major corporations are coming in and plundering the land and taking the land as an asset grab. And then, paradoxically, quite often, producing more net zero solutions, such as destroying the landscapes and the environments with mass production solar panels.
James, bear with me. Ralph, is it arrogance on the part of the decision makers? I mean, do they have a sense of how angry not just the farmers are, but the wider population? And do they care?
I think arrogance is a huge part of this, and I think James made a good point. Let me tell you a quick anecdote that I had with a Dutch farmer when the Dutch government was trying to implement their nitrogen restrictions, and they said, 30% less nitrogen by 2050, and the farmers correctly said, what do they think we are doing? Like, fertilizer is expensive. It's not that they just spread it, hither and yon because they have it for free. So they try to reduce fertilizer use anyways because it is something that they have high expenses on. But you have some bureaucrat sitting in a windowless office, who kind of looks at this and says, 30% looks like a good number, let's do it. But I think there's a second factor that James also alluded to, which is when we say forgotten communities. I mean, there's this old saying, out of sight, out of mind. And we don't give the areas of the economy, the key areas, farming, mining, energy, the attention it deserves. Maybe, I'm being facetious here, but I mean it. We have debates about, quote-unquote, drag queen story hour, but maybe we should have something like farmers' story hour, like coal miners' story hour. Maybe we should kind of imbue young people with a certain respect from where these things come from that make modern life possible, because I think then maybe we would have much more understanding and respect for the farmers and others.
James, you're saying, and Gareth said the same, that in Wales people aren't quite ready to rise, and you're saying in Scotland you don't think that people are at quite that stage. But as Ralph says, wouldn't it be almost beneficial if the farmers rose? Because the old media are not covering this, they're not drawing attention to it, quite the opposite, and they're misportraying it. Don't the people need to be confronted by the everyday reality of the farmers so that they remember they're even there and what it is that they do?
I agree with that, and on previous comments, I agree with all of it. I think there needs to be, as I said before, a blue-collar rising. We've got a channel in this country. So our poll tax spirit. Remember the poll tax and what happened there. If people rise up in a peaceful way, in mass mobilisation numbers, change can happen. And it comes back to the point that was mentioned before. We've got to start raising awareness about the bedrock and foundations of our economy, and that is the producers. The farmers are kind of root and branch, effectively, of that, and they need to be heard in Westminster. But the only way I think we can do that is to take a leaf out of the book of the Dutch and also the Germans and the French, and also going back to the Canadian truckers. And I think we need to support it. It is our job to raise awareness for this because, as you said, it's not getting enough coverage. And the last thing I would say is, ironically, this is a sort of campaign that the left used to be behind. Where are large parts of the left right now? This is not some sort of far-right protest. This is nuts and bolts of the survival of our country and many other countries, our food production and the workers that go with it. And it's not just the farmers. It's the circular economy around farming. You know, it's the shops, it's the deliveries. All of that has to be taken into account. I remember the Country Alliance march we had, 20, 30 years ago. There was about 500,000 people descended on London. Maybe it's the time now to coordinate and galvanise our rural communities and our farmers to do something about this and vote with their feet effectively onto Westminster to make our highfalutin politicians listen to what is one of the primary industries and important industries in this country.
Thank you, James Melville. Thanks for that insight.